Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my February 2022 Author's Answer video. But before I get into the usual routine, I have an exciting announcement. My short story, Cliffs and Vistas, was just published in the Main Street Rags Literary Journal for Volume 27, Number 1, aka Winter 2022 edition, with this really pretty picture of a wolf on the cover. Ta-da! Anyway, the Main Street Rag is a little bit of a prolific small press. It publishes, 4 quarterly editions of their literary newsletter per year, and also a variety of, predominantly poetry, but also anthologies and prose titles, standalone titles per year. I'm very excited to have this story published. It's actually a COVID story of all things. It's dicey, I think, to use that as a template, but I did, and in fact, I think it took a little while for the story to coalesce. I remember one of the first places I submitted to a very kind editor told me about, maybe you need to take a few more steps to make it into a story and not more like, nonfiction ruminations. And from there I did a bit of reshaping that ultimately moved it into the story that it became, and I started submitting again, and last year actually it was a semi-finalist for the Conium Review's Innovative Short Fiction Contest, and then around that time I got the announcement from the Main Street Rag that they would accept it for publication. Anyway, I have all the information about the publication and where to buy it if you're so inclined, and etc. in my link down below. But yeah, this is certainly an optimistic way to start the writing year for 2022. And with that, I will move into my usual Author's Answer content. The Author's Answer series was started by J.D. Archer, who is an author-tuber, and his fellow writing group, wherein they ask themselves a series of various reading and writing-related questions. And I'll link to more information about the group and the questions down below. I have been answering these questions sequentially, one per month, for the past few years, and now I am up to question number 59. Which is, have you ever written a character so offensive that you have fiercely disliked them? And actually, Cliffs and Vistas is a good place to start with this question, because the antagonist in this short story is a dead friend who contacts my protagonist on Zoom and just really puts her through the ringer and makes surviving COVID all that much harder. So she's definitely not all that likable. I'm also finishing up a short story right now, a draft of one that I'm hoping to get critiqued in my writer's salon next week, or part of it anyway. And it's not necessarily that they're deeply offensive, these characters, but they are very unlikable in their way, very self-involved. Their drama is definitely of the self-involved and self-centered kind, which, isn't every reader's cup of tea. But for me, I feel like I really wanted to explore some issues that really are of that self-involved variety. It gets into social media culture and gossip and basically what all that means. I'm just trying to challenge behaviors here. And I'm working on my fantasy novel right now, where I think there's the most stereotypical chance for evil characters, although I really don't like to go in that direction. I don't like mustache twirlers, but I definitely have an antagonist who, compared to all my literary ones, or most of them, is probably, his behavior is a little more beyond the pale, but I still am trying to make him sympathetic in his way, that he has legitimate reasons for feeling the way he does, and maybe even for doing some of what he does. We'll see. He's actually kind of a sleeper character for book number 1. But anyway, one of the things I did was give him a lot of my own fears and angers, and it's my way. I feel like I use my antagonist sometimes to challenge myself and my own beliefs, and about when to pull it back, or, not to let things get too out of hand, especially fear. And I guess the final one I'll mention is the antagonist of my novella, my literary novella that's currently out on submission. His name is Gabe, and he is my antagonist, a man with a chip on his shoulder, had a very difficult upbringing in some ways. He had been abandoned by his parents, left to be raised by his grandparents, seen as the black sheep of the family, sort of the butt of gossip in his small town. So he has a lot of stuff kind of going against him, and he's very jealous of his pampered cousins and the uncle who despises him and has his own issues as well, the way that he's treated this young man. When we come into the story, though, well, Gabe has this horrible chip on his shoulder, but he's also done some bad things himself, namely in the manslaughter department, and the story takes place well after his trial and all of that, but it's sort of about him coming to terms with what he did and trying to get back to life and not let the past define him so much and his own sort of self-pity define him. And I just remember, well, the novella is told from his perspective in a couple of chapters, and then the perspective more often of his cousin Lena, who is the protagonist of the story. And I remember getting my novella graciously critiqued with one of my writing groups, chapter by chapter, over several months. And like one of the final things one of the members said about my story as it was ending was like she was expressing this sort of disgust with Gabe and about like reading through the chip on his shoulder and how difficult of a character he could be, and it made me a little worried, but I feel like she was really talking about the progression of the character, because that's how she ended it, saying, well, now in these later chapters you show how he's grown. And I'm like, yay, because you can't have a static character, at least not as a main character. You can as a non-main character, but for a main character, having someone static doesn't really work. You need to have some sort of progression. So I'm hoping, and what I feel like she was saying in her commentary, is that I changed him from someone who was unlikable and gave him an arc to someone who was a little more sympathetic. I'm not sure if that necessarily answers the question. I guess, again, I feel like I don't write characters who, at least not so far, who I've hated to that nth degree. I guess we shall see. My fantasy project is hopefully going to become relatively bigger. It's going to be my first novel. It has the potential, at least in my head, for a couple of books. So there'll be a bigger cast of characters and probably some that won't be as delved into, so that maybe there'll be something a little more irredeemable coming up. But in general, I'm very drawn to nuanced characters, and usually that comes with a side of some form of empathy or understanding that even if they have some serious flaws, I can identify with them a little bit. At least that's where I go with it. So that about covers it for me now. Again, I will link to information about my short story Cliffs and Vistas, published in the Main Street Rag, down below. Thanks so much for sticking with me here as I sing from the hilltops about this, or from the 12th story of my condo anyway, and for sticking with me through this video. I will be back in the next couple of days to discuss my Friday reads and what I've been up to in my reading life this past week, so stay tuned for that. In the meantime, thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.